I want to bring in Chris Lomas now. He's a pilot and aviation content specialist at Flight Radar 24. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Chris. It is very early on. We're just hours after the crash, but what is your initial assessment of what could have caused this tragedy?
Hi there, thanks for having me. So, as you said, we are in the first few hours, really, of this as an emerging situation. It is a very early time to speculate on probable causes. But looking at this at a very simple level, an accident this close to the ground is quite rare, and there are a huge number of things that potentially could have caused it. Anything from, say, a bird strike to some kind of mechanical failure or pilot error. But I think that at this stage, it's very difficult to speculate on any specific cause. There is, however, some footage that has been circulated and verified online, which shows the aircraft from the rear as it impacts with the ground. And there have been some questions raised about the configuration of the aircraft at that stage, i.e. the landing gear being down and the flaps apparently being up. And that is an unusual configuration for the aircraft at that phase of flight. We'd expect those things to be the other way around. So there has been some speculation on that, but still very early days.
Interesting. Could that potentially have caused or prompted the pilots to put out the Mayday call?
Quite possibly. It's hard to say without hearing the actual content or reading the content of the Mayday as to whether they had a chance to describe what was going on. But in short, to successfully climb after takeoff, the aircraft needs a certain amount of flap on the wing to create enough lift to stabilize the aircraft in a climb. When you take off, the first thing you do is call positive rate and gear up, which is where you're looking to check that the aircraft is climbing, and then you put the landing gear, the wheels up. Now, if that rate of climb wasn't present, then that could be an indication of an incorrect flap position, but it's really hard to say at this time.
Can you talk to us about now what is going to be renewed scrutiny for the 787, the Boeing 787? There hasn't been a crash, but there have certainly been questions about this plane. Tell us more about this make and model.
Well, the 787 Dreamliner is a family of wide-body aircraft built by Boeing. The aircraft involved in the incident was the shortest of these. It's a Dash 8 variant. And whilst the type did have some teething problems in its early development, mostly because the technology on board was so new. A lot of the aircraft is electrically powered using lithium-ion batteries, which were an issue to start with. Despite that, the aircraft has actually gone on to be a fairly reliable and an incredibly safe platform for the airlines that operate it. And there are around 1,100 aircraft of this type operating worldwide, 27 of which, including the accident aircraft, belong to Air India. It's a very successful aeroplane. And whilst there, of course, will be scrutiny over the involvement of the aircraft itself in the incident, I think it's important to understand that that's just one aspect of what will be investigated. And despite there being a certain amount of negative press around Boeing as it is for their other products, so particularly around the 737 MAX, we should really view this as a separate issue. And the aircraft is just one of many things that will be examined as part of the investigation.
And lastly, about the investigation, the scene it's really unbelievable. And being in a residential area, there's so many people milling about. You see pieces of the aircraft, debris strewn over a fairly large area. Of course, we're looking now at that burned-out building. Does that make things more complicated for investigators, Chris?
Yes, it absolutely does. The crash site, I guess, can be just best described as awkward. It's an urban environment, so the investigators are going to have to separate aircraft wreckage from ground wreckage, as well, of course, of dealing with the human situation on the ground there, with people who were killed on board and people who were injured on the ground. And then managing a scene like that, as you suggested there, is quite difficult. And it does appear that there are, in the footage we've seen, there's a lot of people kind of milling around the scene, and hopefully that scene can be secured. But it will be a difficult investigation. The first kind of things that they'll be looking for are what we colloquially refer to as the black boxes. That's the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, which record physical aircraft parameters and the conversations in the cockpit, respectively. They're two orange boxes, and they'll be the first things the investigators will be looking for to start to piece together what happened.
Chris Lomas is a pilot and an aviation content specialist at Flight Radar 24. Chris, again, thank you for your expertise this morning.